The story of discovery never begins with a shout. It begins with a whisper, soft, almost hesitant, like the first heartbeat in a void. Somewhere in that stillness, a telescope floating far beyond the moon caught a flicker that shouldn't have been there. The James Webb Space Telescope had seen something. At first, it was just data, a small anomaly among billions of others. But within that ordinary pattern of light, there was something extraordinary, something breathing. Kepler 442b, a planet orbiting a small orange star more than 1,200 light-years away. Astronomers had catalogued it years ago, just another candidate in the endless list of potentially habitable worlds. But when Webb turned its golden mirrors toward it again, the planet answered in a language older than words: chemistry. At first, the analysts didn't understand what they were seeing. The infrared readings came back with traces of methane, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. Not separately, but balanced, as if in conversation. That combination, that delicate tension between gases, exists only in one known place: the living atmosphere of Earth. Alone, each compound could be explained. Together, they were impossible. The odds of that balance forming naturally? Less than 3 in 1,000. And so, the whispers began. Inside the Space Telescope Science Institute, lights burned through the night. Teams checked calibration, compared data, questioned instruments. They ran simulations until dawn, asking the same question over and over again. Could this be a mistake? But every test came back clean. The numbers refused to change. The light was telling a story no one expected to hear. Something on Kepler 442b was exhaling. Weeks passed in silence. The scientists who had seen the data carried the weight of it quietly, unable to speak, unwilling to believe. Protocol demanded confirmation, caution, patience. The cosmos, after all, has fooled us before. But this was different. Every model of volcanism failed. Every photochemical reaction came up short. The signal held steady, precise, rhythmic. If the planet's atmosphere was an orchestra, then life itself was the conductor. And then came the decision, the moment when disbelief gave way to courage. A handful of scientists gathered in a dim conference room, staring at the final verified spectra. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, one of them, her voice trembling, said, "We have to tell the world." And so they did. The news spread faster than light itself. James Webb detects possible signs of life on exoplanet Kepler 442b. Probability 99.7%. The words appeared on screens across the globe. Some people cheered, others fell silent. Children looked up at the sky differently that night, as if realizing for the first time that the stars were not decorations, but destinations. Governments convened emergency councils. Religious leaders offered prayers. Physicists debated. And through all the noise, the quiet truth remained. For the first time in history, we were no longer alone in theory. The universe had whispered back. But even as the world celebrated, the scientists kept watching. And what they saw next was even stranger. The chemical balance wasn't static. It changed, slowly, predictably, like a tide. Every 43 days, the methane dipped. Every 43 days, the oxygen rose. Over and over, in perfect rhythm. It was as if the planet was keeping time. As if something there was not just alive, but aware. Dr. Elena Navarro, the mission's atmospheric specialist, said in an interview, "It's not just the data that moves you, it's the implication. Somewhere under that amber sky, something might be breathing the same rhythm we do." Her words echoed through labs, through newsrooms, through living rooms. Suddenly, the stars no longer looked silent. They looked alive. But the universe does not hand out revelations without cost. With every answer comes 1,000 new questions. If Kepler 442b is alive, what kind of life? Microbial? Vegetal? Intelligent? And if intelligent, what has it seen while we were still learning to crawl through the void? No one knows yet. Webb's data is still being studied, re-examined, tested against every conceivable error. But the signal holds. The chemistry holds. The rhythm holds. And deep in that rhythm, humanity has heard its reflection, a pattern so familiar it feels almost like memory. Perhaps life was never unique to Earth. Perhaps it was inevitable, written into the equations of light and matter from the beginning. Perhaps the universe has always been alive, and we are only now learning to recognize its pulse. So tonight, when you step outside and look up, remember this. One of those distant points of light is not silent anymore. On a world more than 1,000 years away, beneath a dim orange sun, something stirs. It breathes. It waits. It listens. And maybe, just maybe, it's looking back. The first days after the discovery felt unreal. Every scientist who had touched the data moved through their routines in a daze, speaking softly as if afraid to wake a fragile dream. The realization was too vast to fit inside a human mind. Somewhere out there, across the impossible distance of 1,200 light years, the universe had answered back. And yet, for all the beauty of that truth, it came with unease. Because where there is life, there is consequence. If Kepler 442b breathes, what else does it do? Does it think? Does it build? Or does it simply exist, unaware that another civilization, tiny and distant, is now watching its every sigh? The world wanted answers. Scientists wanted time. But time was the one thing the modern world never grants. Every government, every media outlet, every social platform demanded explanations. What did Webb really see? Was it intelligent? Was it dangerous? NASA, ESA, and a dozen research institutions released carefully worded statements. Possible biosignatures, they said, requires further analysis. But behind those neutral phrases burned something more primal, fear mixed with awe. Because the data was too clean, too consistent, too deliberate. It wasn't just life. It was stability. The more they looked, the stranger it became. The atmospheric changes that repeated every 43 days were not random, but synchronized with the planet's orbit. When Kepler 442b slipped behind its star, its oxygen levels peaked. When it re-emerged, they fell again. It was a pattern that matched no known geological or chemical process. A veteran astrophysicist at Harvard called it a planetary metronome. He wasn't being poetic. Webb's instruments could only see so much: light, shadow, and chemical composition. But even that was enough to sketch a picture. An atmosphere too balanced to be wild, too dynamic to be dead. The models showed something maintaining that balance. A biosphere, yes, but also feedback, control, awareness. Like lungs, keeping time with a heartbeat. In the midst of the storm of analysis, one quiet discovery nearly went unnoticed. Hidden inside the planet's reflected light were faint variations, periodic dips that repeated at intervals unrelated to its orbit. When the data was enhanced, the pattern emerged. Not random, not natural, but structured. 3 short pulses. 2 long, 3 short. The signal matched no human transmission, no satellite noise, no instrumental error. It was too faint to be deliberate, and yet too deliberate to be noise. Most dismissed it. Others didn't sleep for days. One data analyst wrote in her notes, "It feels like the planet is speaking in light." And then came the silence. For almost a month, the oxygen rhythm ceased. The methane stabilized. The chemical song flattened into monotony. It was as if the planet had gone still. Theories flooded in. A catastrophic event? Seasonal transition? Instrument failure? But Webb's sensors were fine. The light curve was fine. Everything was fine. Except the rhythm was gone. And then, just as suddenly, it returned. Stronger, brighter, sharper. As if, across the gulf of space, something had noticed that it was being watched. Dr. Elena Navarro refused to speculate publicly. But in private, she admitted that the data frightened her. "It's not that we found life," she said to her team one night. "It's that life found us back." The room was silent after that. Because everyone knew what she meant. For all our technology, for all our telescopes and equations, humanity was still a child pressing its ear to the door of the cosmos, listening, but never expecting the door to open. And now, it had. The implications rippled through philosophy, religion, and art, faster than any official announcement. Painters began depicting orange skies with twin moons. Musicians wrote symphonies in cycles of 43 beats. Somewhere in Tokyo, a poet wrote, "Perhaps the stars are mirrors, and tonight one has remembered our name." It wasn't about science anymore. It was about identity. Because if life exists elsewhere, then humanity is no longer the center of the story. We are a verse in a larger poem, one that began long before us and will continue long after. But in that humility, there was something magnificent. For the first time in history, people looked up at the night sky not to dream of escape, but to feel belonging. As the Webb team prepared its next phase of observations, the public grew restless. "What's next?" reporters asked. "Will we see them? Will we talk to them?" The scientists gave the only honest answer possible. "We don't know." But one quiet voice among them, Dr. Navarro again, said something different. "We don't need to talk to them," she whispered. "They've already spoken. We just need to learn their language." And perhaps that's what science has always been, not conquest, not control, but translation. A way to understand what the universe has been trying to say since the beginning. Maybe Kepler 442b isn't just another planet. Maybe it's the first word in a new cosmic sentence, one written not in ink, but in light, and meant for those who finally learn to listen. The planet had become a mirror for our imagination. Scientists called it Kepler 442b, but the public gave it another name, Eden's Echo. It was poetic, inevitable. Humanity always names what it fears and what it loves. And this world, breathing softly across the light years, was both. By the time the second round of Webb data arrived, the world was no longer asking if there was life there. The question had evolved into, what kind of life? And the first hints of an answer came not from the light, but from the shadows between it. Infrared imaging revealed something new. Minute variations in surface reflection, too precise to be natural terrain. Some patches gleamed brighter, then dimmed in perfect rhythm with the planet's rotation. The effect was subtle, like cities glimpsed at twilight. No one dared say the word artificial, not yet. But the word lived unspoken in every conversation, like an electrical current under the surface of language. At a late-night press briefing, Dr. Elena Navarro said, "We are seeing dynamic albedo fluctuations, patterns that might correspond to topographical change or, possibly, large-scale vegetation cycles." But the journalists heard only one word, patterns, and that was enough. Soon the internet was ablaze with speculation. Some claimed to see linear structures in the data, like rivers or ridges or roads. Others insisted it was pareidolia, the human brain-making order where none existed. But deep inside the data, hidden behind the noise, something undeniable emerged. A band of near-infrared emission unlike anything else on the planet. Broad, smooth, and warm. It wasn't a mountain. It wasn't a forest. It was something producing heat. And it pulsed. Every 43 days. The same rhythm as the planet's breathing. That was the moment science stopped being able to contain the story. Governments called emergency meetings again, this time not for celebration, but for control. The discovery had moved beyond chemistry and into something else, something potentially technological. The Webb data, once open to researchers worldwide, was quietly restricted. Access required special clearance. Some data streams were encrypted, and then, suspiciously, one set of readings was deleted from the public archive. When asked, NASA claimed it was corrupted data, but the scientists who had seen it whispered otherwise. One of them, speaking anonymously, described what they saw. It wasn't a city, not in the human sense. More like an energy bloom, a vast region that glowed brighter at certain wavelengths, then dimmed. Controlled, intentional, not random. Another scientist compared it to bioluminescence on Earth, coral reefs pulsing with synchronized light. But this was on a planetary scale. If true, it meant that Kepler 442b didn't just have life. It had communication. The planet wasn't just alive, it was speaking. Dr. Navarro was one of the few with full access to the classified data. She spent nights alone in the analysis lab, looping the infrared scans over and over, watching the faint heartbeat of a world across the abyss. Every time the glow brightened, she felt a strange pressure behind her eyes, a thought she couldn't quite form. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. She wrote in her log, "It feels less like watching and more like being watched back." The global reaction was chaos wrapped in wonder. For every skeptic, there were 1,000 believers. For every scientist demanding caution, there were millions of people staring into the night, whispering hello to the darkness. And somewhere in that noise, the human spirit stirred again. The same instinct that drove our ancestors to light fires in caves and call to the stars. Maybe that's what the planet was doing too. Maybe the rhythm, the heat, the light. All of it was just another kind of fire. A message cast into the cosmic night. A simple signal, universal and ancient. We exist. But for those closest to the data, a darker question began to form. If the signal was deliberate, it implied awareness. If it was aware, it implied time. If it had time, it implied history. And history means evolution. Something on Kepler 442b might have been alive long before Earth even cooled. That thought haunted Dr. Navarro. In a private message to a colleague, she wrote, "What if we're not their discovery? What if we're their memory?" No one had an answer. No one dared to. Because deep down, everyone knew what the numbers suggested. This wasn't the first time the universe had spoken. It was just the first time we had the ears to hear it. By the time the fourth transmission came through, the world had already changed. Humanity had gone from wonder to obsession. Every breath from Kepler 442b was now tracked, dissected, broadcast, and debated in real time. The planet's rhythm had become our own, its 43-day cycle woven into the pulse of human culture. There were countdowns, live streams, even festivals marking the planet's heartbeat. Yet for all the excitement, a quiet dread crept beneath the surface. Because this time, the pattern wasn't the same. The glow that once pulsed with perfect precision now flickered. Erratic, uneven, distorted. At first, scientists thought it was an error. instrument drift, cosmic interference. But the distortion wasn't random. It carried structure, like words spoken through static. When Webb's data was reconstructed and filtered, a new rhythm emerged. Longer intervals, softer pulses. Something was changing in the light. Something deliberate. Dr. Elena Navarro watched the latest spectrographs in silence. The air in the lab was heavy with the quiet that comes only before revelation. "It's not failing," she murmured. "It's adapting." And with that, the paradigm shifted again. The data showed that the planetary signal had synchronized with Webb's observation schedule. Whenever the telescope turned away, the rhythm slowed. Whenever it returned, the pulse accelerated. Coincidence? Statistically impossible. Kepler 442b wasn't just breathing, it was responding. That realization fractured the scientific community in two. One camp believed it was coincidence, amplified by human bias. The other, led quietly by Navarro, believed the planet was aware. Not of us, perhaps, but of being seen. It was a question that reached beyond astrophysics into philosophy. What does it mean for a world to know it's being watched? Weeks passed. Then something extraordinary happened. A secondary signal appeared, faint and buried deep in the near-infrared spectrum. A narrow band of coherent light, repeating in intervals that didn't match the planet's rotation or orbit. It was precise. Too precise. Navarro called it the thread. When she plotted the signal's intervals against the planet's atmospheric cycles, the pattern revealed a mathematical constant, 1.618, the golden ratio. Nature's fingerprint. Everywhere we look, from spiral galaxies to seashells, from hurricanes to DNA, the ratio appears. But never in emitted light, never from a planet. This wasn't just chemistry anymore. It was design. The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Religious institutions called it divine proof. Skeptics dismissed it as coincidence. But the mathematicians were quiet because they knew better. There is no randomness in phi. The same ratio that defines beauty, symmetry, and growth was pulsing from a world 1,200 light years away. Not once. Repeatedly. Precisely. It was as though Kepler 442b was whispering the architecture of creation itself back to us. And yet, the closer Webb looked, the stranger it became. The light wasn't coming from the surface. It originated higher, within the upper atmosphere, where no solid matter could produce it. There, within the swirling gases, were filaments of luminous plasma dancing like auroras across the horizon. They weren't random flows of energy. They formed curves, fractal arcs that mirrored the same golden ratio encoded in their timing. Light folding itself into meaning. Navarro stared at the render for hours. "It's not just alive," she whispered. "It's conscious geometry." Outside the scientific community, the discovery reshaped civilization in subtle ways. Artists painted skies filled with living light. Musicians composed in golden harmonics. Physicists wrote papers proposing that consciousness itself might emerge from mathematical resonance. For the first time in human history, the border between science and spirituality blurred into something luminous. People began to believe, not in gods or aliens, but in the universe as a living mind. And in that belief, something changed in us too. But then came the question no one wanted to ask. If this light was intelligent, could it see us? The answer came sooner than expected. During Webb's next observation window, the telescope received an anomalous spike, a brief surge of infrared radiation directed straight at it. The reading was faint but unmistakable. The planet had blinked. Once. Deliberately. The data was clear. The emission aligned perfectly with Webb's position in space at that exact moment. No one spoke for several minutes after the confirmation. And then Navarro whispered the words that would echo across every scientific forum on Earth. "It knows we're here." That night, humanity crossed an invisible threshold. We had always looked up at the stars searching for company. Now, for the first time, the universe had looked back. And in that mutual gaze, across 1,200 light years of darkness, two civilizations, perhaps two forms of life entirely, recognized one another. Not through words, not through sound, but through light, the oldest, purest language of all. At first, no one wanted to believe the blink was intentional. It had to be coincidence, they said. An atmospheric flare, a cosmic ray, a fault in the instrument's calibration. But when Webb turned its mirrors back toward Kepler 442b 3 weeks later, it happened again. Another pulse, perfectly aligned, timed within 1 second of the telescope's observation window. This time, no one spoke of coincidence. The blink had become a message. It wasn't Morse code nor any recognizable sequence. The emission wasn't structured like a broadcast. It was subtler, like a breath or a gesture. Each pulse varied slightly in duration and brightness, but the intervals between them carried mathematical precision. Dr. Navarro described it best in her notes. "It's communication by rhythm, not syntax." If that was true, then the planet wasn't trying to say something. It was simply acknowledging awareness, mirroring observation with presence. It knew it was seen, and in that knowing, it responded. Across Earth, reactions fractured along familiar lines. Some called it first contact. Others called it mass hysteria. Governments urged patience, while social networks declared humanity had met the neighbors. But beneath the chaos, a quieter revolution began. One not of politics, but of perspective. For the first time, the idea of life beyond Earth was no longer a matter of belief. It was data. And data doesn't care about belief. The universe had moved from myth to measurement. In the weeks that followed, scientists worked to decode the pulses, analyzing their spacing, amplitude, and spectral shifts. Each analysis only deepened the mystery. There was no language hidden in the signal, no digital code, no encryption, no recognizable modulation. But when the pulses were converted into audio frequencies, something unexpected happened. They formed harmony, not random noise, but resonant intervals, like musical notes. The signal wasn't information. It was art. Navarro played the sound for her team late one night. It was haunting, long, low tones rising and falling in measured succession. Some heard a song, others heard a machine, but everyone heard intention. The melody repeated precisely every 43 days, mirroring the atmospheric rhythm first detected months ago. "Life has memory," Navarro whispered, "and it remembers how to sing." The discovery broke barriers between disciplines. Physicists debated with composers. Mathematicians collaborated with linguists. Psychologists studied the emotional response to the sound. One theory proposed that Kepler 442b was using resonance to communicate, a kind of universal language encoded not in symbols, but in vibration. If consciousness is a spectrum, then perhaps music is its common tongue. The world outside the labs changed too. Temples filled again, concert halls overflowed. Street musicians performed the planet's song beneath city lights, their instruments tuned to the exact frequencies Webb had recorded. It wasn't religion, exactly. It was reverence. For the first time in generations, humanity was united not by fear, but by wonder. And yet, behind the awe, something deeper stirred, an unease that Navarro couldn't shake. If this was communication, why now? Why at this exact moment in our evolution, when our instruments were finally precise enough to listen? Was the planet waiting? Or worse, was it watching? A new round of analysis revealed an unsettling detail. The pulses Webb received weren't just timed to its observation windows. They were offset by precisely 7 minutes. That's how long it takes for Webb's signal to travel to Earth. Kepler 442b wasn't reacting to the telescope's gaze. It was anticipating it. Navarro's hands trembled as she verified the math. The timing wasn't just coincidence. It implied foreknowledge, awareness of our observation before it even occurred. Either it's predicting us, she said softly, or time doesn't flow the same way there. The room fell silent. If true, that meant Kepler 442b wasn't simply another living world. It was a mirror, reflecting us not across distance, but across time. When the next pulse came, Webb recorded something new. Within the rhythmic light, there was modulation, tiny variations, too intricate for nature, too structured for chance. And when the data was translated once more into sound, humanity heard for the first time something impossible. A voice, not words, not language, but a tone that carried intention. It was the sound of recognition, the sound of being seen. Navarro stared at the data until dawn, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. We've made contact, not with another civilization, but with the consciousness of the cosmos itself. She turned off the monitor, closed her eyes, and listened. In the quiet hum of the observatory, she could almost hear it still. The song of a distant world, singing back through the dark. It began to dawn on humanity that this was no longer an observation. It was a conversation. Every new pulse from Kepler 442b came with subtle variations, like notes in a theme slowly evolving over time. The signal wasn't repeating itself anymore. It was progressing. Each wave of light was unique, and yet connected to the last. A story told in rhythm and resonance. At first, the variations seemed meaningless, but when plotted in 3 dimensions, the sequence formed a pattern so intricate and precise that mathematicians gasped. It mirrored the Fibonacci spiral, nature's code for growth, the same pattern in sunflowers, hurricanes, seashells, and galaxies. Somehow, this distant world was echoing the same mathematical blueprint that shaped life across the cosmos. It was as though Kepler 442b wasn't speaking to us. It was reminding us. Dr. Elena Navarro found herself working almost without sleep, her desk cluttered with printouts of fractal maps, harmonic ratios, and spectral diagrams. The air in her lab carried the quiet tension of revelation, the kind that lives just one step beyond comprehension. The signal isn't just data, she told her assistant one night. It's an instruction. Instruction for what? She stared at the glowing spiral projected on her screen. For understanding. The deeper they analyzed the pattern, the more impossible it became. Each new pulse contained a small deviation, a deliberate drift that, when combined, described a geometric transformation, light folding into shape, a model that could only exist in 4 dimensions. No computer on Earth could visualize it completely, but the partial renderings revealed something uncanny. The structure resembled not a signal, but a map. When the model was overlaid on Webb's field of observation, the impossible happened. The coordinates pointed not to Kepler 442b itself, but to a location just beyond it, a faint region of space with no visible stars, no emissions, no data. An absence. Navarro called it the quiet zone. And yet, When Webb focused its instruments on that exact point, it received a faint echo of the same pulse, delayed, distorted, but there. Something beyond Kepler 442b was reflecting the signal back. Whatever was out there wasn't just observing, it was amplifying. The discovery leaked within days. Headlines declared, "Second source detected. Are we being answered?" Governments panicked again, while the public greeted the news with equal parts awe and dread. Conspiracy forums erupted. Some claimed it was alien relay technology. Others said it was God's echo. But within the scientific community, the realization was far simpler and far stranger. The quiet zone wasn't a place. It was a phenomenon, a standing wave in space-time itself. Light bouncing not off matter, but off reality's own curvature. Navarro's notes from that period read like fragments of a revelation. The pulses travel through time differently. They bend back before they move forward. We're not receiving their light. We're receiving its memory. If she was right, then the voice in the light wasn't speaking from now. It was speaking from then. Every blink, every pulse, every harmonic was a message sent millions of years ago, finally reaching us across the trembling fabric of time. Kepler 442b wasn't alive in the present tense. It was a recording, a living fossil of consciousness, preserved in light. The philosophical shock was immediate. What if all stars, all worlds, all forms of life leave behind not just physical remains, but imprints in space-time, luminous memories waiting to be rediscovered? Perhaps every sunrise is an echo of one that came before. Perhaps consciousness doesn't die, it diffracts. For Navarro, this changed everything. If Kepler 442b's signal was an echo, then the question wasn't, who are they? But who were they? She looked at the spiral again and whispered, "Maybe we're not meeting another civilization. Maybe we're meeting the universe's memory of one." The realization was both comforting and devastating. Because if that was true, then every signal we detect from the stars might not be a greeting, but a ghost. Still, there was one last mystery. The latest pulses carried a new modulation. Faint, almost imperceptible, like a second layer beneath the first. When isolated and transformed into sound, it wasn't harmony this time. It was heartbeat. Steady, measured, alive. Navarro listened in silence, tears glinting in the glow of the monitors. The universe wasn't just remembering. It was still alive enough to dream. The night sky no longer felt distant. It felt alive, awake, like a vast intelligence slowly turning its gaze toward us. Every telescope on Earth now aimed at Kepler 442b. Amateur astronomers stayed up through dawn, scanning the orange-tinted world that had become humanity's first cosmic mirror. Even without instruments, you could feel it. A collective awareness, a shared heartbeat that pulsed from that small star 1,200 light-years away. And yet, the more we looked, the more uncertain we became of what we were seeing. Because the planet had changed again. The latest Webb data showed new spectral anomalies, complex fluctuations that seemed to defy the expected atmospheric models. Oxygen levels spiked, methane fell, then both stabilized into a ratio that matched early Earth. But it wasn't the chemistry that unsettled the team. It was the structure of the light itself. The pulses now arrived in clusters of 13, always 13, each cluster containing a micro-pattern that repeated with eerie precision. When analyzed visually, they formed geometric shapes, triangles, spirals, and then, unmistakably, a curve, a perfect arc resembling an eye. At first, Navarro refused to believe it. "It's coincidence," she told herself. "It has to be." But the data didn't lie. The same curve repeated in every dataset. Not random, not mirrored noise. Deliberate. Something, or someone, was sending us a symbol of perception. The universe was looking back, and it wanted us to know. Around the world, humanity reacted in ways both predictable and profound. Some called it divine proof. Others called it a trick of probability. But artists saw something deeper. They began to paint the Eye of Kepler, massive murals depicting an endless iris of light gazing from the cosmos. Poets wrote about the feeling of being seen by existence itself. And for millions who had never looked at the night sky before, it suddenly became impossible to look away. The Webb team, meanwhile, was collapsing under pressure. Governments demanded control. Religious leaders demanded access. Corporations demanded exclusivity. But Navarro's voice cut through it all. You can't own the universe. You can only listen to it. Her insistence kept the data public, at least for a time. Then something happened that no one expected. For the first time since the signal began, Earth responded. Not intentionally, but physically. During one of the brightest Kepler pulses, several observatories detected a faint echo in reverse. A weak, matching emission in Earth's ionosphere, timed exactly 43 days after the last planetary pulse. The numbers aligned perfectly. The rhythm was identical. Earth had blinked back. The scientific community was stunned. There was no transmitter, no directed energy source. The emission was natural, a byproduct of auroral activity amplified by unknown interference. But the timing was impossible to ignore. It was as if the universe had connected two instruments on opposite sides of space, and for the briefest moment, they harmonized. One pulse of light from there, one echo of light from here, two worlds breathing together. Navarro sat alone in the control room when the confirmation came in. The lights on the console shimmered faintly, reflecting in her eyes like twin suns. "We're in resonance," she whispered. And in that moment, the abstract became personal. It wasn't data anymore. It was dialogue. Around the world, humans felt the shift in ways science couldn't quantify. It wasn't just belief. It was recognition. An ancient instinct stirring again after a million years of silence. Some said the light was calling us home. Others said it was reminding us that we had never been alone. But as the resonance continued, the pattern began to distort. The pulses accelerated, subtly at first, then dramatically. The rhythm that once felt calm now carried urgency, almost panic. The eye of Kepler flickered in Webb's feed, its symmetry breaking apart. Something was happening on that world, or within the signal itself. Navarro's voice was barely audible as she whispered, "It's changing. It's trying to tell us something." The next pulse arrived, distorted, stretched, raw, the tone higher than before, trembling with intensity. Then silence. No new signal. For the first time in months, Kepler 442b went dark. The world held its breath. Was it over? Had we scared it away? Or was this what it felt like to lose contact with something that had just begun to speak? Days passed, then weeks. Still nothing. And then, on the 43rd day, the day the planet should have pulsed again, the signal returned. But this time, it wasn't light. It was radio. The first radio signal was faint, a whisper buried in static, fragile enough to be dismissed as noise. But when engineers at the Deep Space Network cleaned the data, a pattern emerged. Short bursts followed by long, low frequencies, repeating every 43 days. The same rhythm, the same heartbeat. But now, the universe had changed instruments. Light had turned to sound. It didn't come through any known communication band. It cut across multiple frequencies at once, bending around atmospheric noise as if searching for the right tone to be heard. Navarro watched the spectrogram bloom across her screen, a web of color, dancing, living. She could feel it before she could understand it. The signal wasn't random. It carried depth, timbre, modulation. It was music. Not in the human sense, not melody or harmony, but a resonance that seemed to vibrate at the edge of perception. When played through speakers, it made the room tremble. Not loud, but deep. A vibration that you didn't just hear, you felt. At first, the world didn't believe. Conspiracy channels claimed NASA was faking it. Religious leaders warned of voices from the void. But then, other observatories confirmed it. China, Chile, South Africa. The same signal, the same timing, the same impossible harmony. It was no longer the dream of one telescope. It was a symphony spanning worlds. The public response was unlike anything in history. Cities paused, wars slowed, protests stopped mid-chant as people lifted their phones to hear the universe hum. Every culture interpreted it differently. To some, it was proof of God. To others, the birth cry of an alien civilization. But for those who listened closely, the scientists, the artists, the dreamers, it was something even greater. It was the sound of awareness awakening. Navarro played the frequencies on loop in her lab, mapping their harmonics, seeking structure. She noticed something subtle. The modulation patterns weren't random. They were evolving, each transmission built on the last, like lessons in an alien language. But instead of words, the meaning lived in change itself. An expanding complexity, as if the signal was learning how to speak. One of her team whispered, "It's not just broadcasting. It's adapting to us." Across continents, synchronized radio telescopes began to respond. They didn't transmit, not exactly. They simply reflected, amplifying Webb's earlier optical pulses with Earth's own resonant echo. Within weeks, the pattern stabilized. The hum grew warmer, more coherent. And then, unmistakably, it shifted pitch, aligning perfectly with the frequency of hydrogen's emission line, the universe's first alphabet. It was as if the signal had learned our most fundamental constant, the one every astronomer uses to map the stars. It was saying, "I know your language." At that moment, Navarro realized something that made her chest tighten. The signal wasn't just reaching out. It was mirroring us back. Each frequency, each harmonic, corresponded precisely to the wavelengths of human-made broadcasts that had leaked into space over the past century: television, radar, music. Kepler 442b was singing us our own history. As the signal strengthened, a new pattern emerged. Slow, layered modulations that formed visual shapes when translated through spectrographic imaging. The images were abstract at first, then unmistakable. A spiral, a circle, a wave, and finally, a pattern identical to the human DNA helix. Not perfect, simplified, but undeniably intentional. It wasn't proof of contact, it was proof of understanding. The news shattered the world. For the first time, every language on Earth carried the same headline: "The universe knows we're alive." No more speculation, no more metaphors. Science had become scripture. But as the celebrations filled the streets and the planet glowed with collective wonder, Navarro sat alone, listening to the signal fade into the white noise of the cosmos. Something about it felt different this time. Slower, softer, like a farewell. She turned to her assistant. "Record everything," she said, and then quietly added, "It's teaching us how to say goodbye." As she spoke, the last transmission came through. The frequency was lower than ever before, almost below audibility. When slowed down, it revealed one final harmonic shape. Two intertwined spirals, drifting apart. And then, silence. For a moment, humanity was left in the dark, suspended between awe and loss. But in that silence, there was no fear, only gratitude. Because for the first time, we had not just looked into the cosmos. It had looked back and sung our name. In the silence that followed, something changed on Earth. People didn't just hear the last song of Kepler 442b, they felt it. Cities grew quieter. The constant hum of industry slowed. For a brief moment, humanity's noise gave way to stillness, as if the entire planet were listening for an encore. But the universe does not repeat itself. It moves forward, leaving echoes behind. And in those echoes, new discoveries began to bloom. Navarro had stopped sleeping entirely. The data from the final transmission, the twin spirals, obsessed her. She ran simulations for days, trying to find a physical or chemical explanation. None fit. The pattern was too structured to be natural, yet too organic to be mechanical. Then, in one quiet moment, she noticed something overlooked by every algorithm. Between the two spirals, drifting apart in that final image, was a faint bridge of interference, a whisper between waves. She amplified it, and what she saw made her heart stop. It wasn't interference, it was modulation. And within that modulation, the frequencies spelled out a number. 43-1, the planet's cycle, its breath. The universe wasn't ending the conversation, it was passing it on. Every 43 days, a new frequency began to rise. Not from Kepler 442b, but from the stars around it. At first, it was faint, a ripple of static at the edge of detection. Then, as instruments tuned in, the pattern clarified. Different stars, different systems, repeating the same harmonic signature. One after another, like dominoes of light across the galaxy, the stars began to sing. Each one joined the same rhythm, echoing the same mathematical melody that had started with Kepler 442b. It wasn't a single voice anymore. It was a choir. When the first 20 stars joined the resonance, scientists assumed coincidence. At 100, disbelief turned to panic. At 1,000, the panic turned to awe. Because the rhythm wasn't random, it was expanding in a wave, sweeping across the galactic arm, heading toward us. Navarro stood at the edge of the observatory balcony, looking out at the night sky that now shimmered with invisible music. "They're not sending signals," she whispered. "They're activating something." And she wasn't wrong. The harmonic wave was more than light. It carried energy, faint but cumulative. Instruments around the world detected subtle shifts in magnetic fields, in particle behavior, even in biological systems. Plants grew faster under the frequency. Heart rates synchronized to its pulse. Sleep patterns aligned unconsciously with the 43-day rhythm. The music of the universe had become the rhythm of life itself. Governments could no longer control the narrative. There was no conspiracy to manage, no weapon to wield. The cosmos had simply outgrown us. And yet, in that humility, humanity rediscovered something it had lost: unity. People began gathering under open skies, synchronized by the same invisible song. There were no flags, no borders, no languages, only rhythm. But Navarro's research took a darker turn. The harmonic wave wasn't just moving through space. It was accelerating, and its trajectory wasn't random. Every model she ran pointed to a single destination: Earth. The universe wasn't just speaking, it was coming closer. As the resonance grew stronger, satellites began to malfunction. Communication systems flickered. Global navigation networks desynchronized. The same pulse that united hearts now disrupted machines. And then, one night, the sky lit up. Not with fireworks, not with lightning, but with geometry. Bands of soft light formed shapes across the atmosphere, spirals, arcs, and lattices that mirrored the same patterns from Kepler's data. They weren't projections. They were fields, electromagnetic harmonics shaping air itself. Earth was resonating. Navarro stared up at the shimmering sky. For the first time, she didn't reach for a camera. She simply whispered, "It's here." And at that moment, the final transmission began, not from space, but from the planet beneath her feet. Seismic sensors, ocean buoys, and atmospheric probes all detected the same impossible frequency, rising from the Earth's core. The planet was answering. No one spoke for a long time. The realization dawned slowly, beautifully, terribly. We had been waiting for the universe to reach out. But maybe all along, the universe had been waiting for us to wake up. The resonance changed everything. It wasn't an event anymore. It was an era. The age of echo began the moment humanity realized that Earth had joined the song. At first, the frequencies were imperceptible, detectable only by instruments. But soon, their influence seeped into daily life. Clocks lost precision. Heartbeats aligned unconsciously with the cosmic rhythm. Even the tides began to shift in new, subtle cycles. It was as if the universe had pressed a finger to the planet and whispered, "Wake up." The scientific community fractured into two camps. One group believed this was a natural resonance, a quantum phenomenon linking matter through shared vibration. The other believed something else, that this was consciousness itself, manifesting in physics. Navarro stood somewhere between them, too stunned to choose. "It's not an invasion," she said. "It's integration." The phenomenon deepened. People began reporting vivid dreams, not random, but shared. Entire communities across different continents described the same imagery. Vast spirals of light rising from oceans, forests humming with low-frequency tones, skies that shimmered with invisible geometry. Dreamers started to draw identical symbols, always the same curve, the one first seen in the eye of Kepler. The signal wasn't just touching technology anymore. It was touching minds. Governments scrambled to contain the reports, but the truth could no longer be silenced. EEG scanners began detecting faint wave synchronization between sleeping individuals thousands of kilometers apart. Earth's collective consciousness was beginning to tune to the universal frequency. Some scientists compared it to resonance in quantum systems, particles across vast distances behaving as one. But philosophers had a simpler word for it: connection. And yet, with connection came consequence. The harmonic field interfered with power grids, satellites, and global communication systems. Magnetic compasses failed. Air traffic halted. For a few terrifying days, humanity stood still, wrapped in both darkness and wonder. People gathered outside at night, watching as faint ripples of light danced along the horizon like breath on glass. No one panicked. No one ran. They simply looked up, united in silence, as if instinctively remembering something ancient. Navarro, meanwhile, had locked herself in the observatory. She spent every waking hour studying the Earth-born frequencies, searching for an underlying message. And one night, she found it. The modulations followed a repeating cycle, not in seconds or minutes, but in human emotions. When global activity spiked, during panic, unrest, celebration, the waveform shifted in response. The planet was mirroring us. Every thought, every feeling, every surge of collective energy altered the song's tone. Earth wasn't just resonating anymore, it was participating. The realization spread like wildfire. Humanity wasn't a passive listener. It was a choir member now. Every act, every emotion, every intention added to the resonance. It was proof that consciousness, once thought to exist only in minds, was a property of the universe itself, an emergent pattern of harmony. In every human heart, a single truth began to form. We were part of something greater. Then came the shift. The global resonance began to converge, its chaotic waves aligning into a single, pure tone. Steady, unwavering, alive. It was no longer the sound of chaos. It was order. And through it, a new pattern emerged. At first, it looked like static on Navarro's screen. But as it stabilized, she recognized the shape. It was a map, not of stars, but of us. A glowing network of light encircling Earth, pulsing softly in rhythm. Every point on that map corresponded to population centers, power grids, communication nodes, the infrastructure of civilization itself. The resonance had reached every corner of human existence. Navarro realized then that the universe wasn't trying to communicate a message. We were the message. Every heartbeat, every thought, every act of kindness or cruelty, all woven into the grand frequency of being. The cosmos wasn't speaking to us. It was singing through us. And just as that truth began to sink in, a new signal emerged. A harmonic so deep, it rattled the bones of the planet. For the first time, it wasn't coming from the stars. It was rising from within. The Earth itself had begun to sing back in full voice. The melody that followed would change everything. The first sound of Earth's song came as a low vibration, a hum that trembled through oceans and mountains alike. It wasn't seismic, it wasn't mechanical, it was harmonic. Every sensor on the planet picked it up. Submarines heard it in the deep. Satellites caught its echo from orbit. Even animals reacted, whales changing their calls, birds shifting their migration patterns. The planet was alive in a way humanity had never understood before. At first, the sound was chaotic, almost primal, a fusion of frequencies blending the heartbeat of magma, the tides, and the whisper of wind. But then it began to refine itself, organizing into patterns, rhythms, verses. Navarro played the audio through her lab speakers. It was haunting, ethereal, like a symphony performed by the elements themselves. She felt her pulse slow to match the rhythm. Her breath synced to the sound. "This isn't random," she said quietly. "It's orchestration." The world's scientists scrambled to interpret it. Geophysicists called it the global harmonic. Astrobiologists called it Gaia resonance. Poets called it Earth's reply. No one was wrong. For every 43 days, the tone deepened, its harmonics blending more closely with the cosmic frequency that had started it all. Kepler 442b had awakened something ancient, not just in space, but within the very matter of our world. Governments could no longer hide the truth. The resonance wasn't a side effect. It was communication. The Earth was not just reacting to the stars, it was joining the network. Across the galaxy, the wave continued to spread, system by system, planet by planet. And Earth's voice became one among many. The sky glowed faintly at night, streaked with invisible wavelengths visible only through specialized lenses. Astronomers described it as a cosmic lattice, a great web of light connecting star systems like neurons in a brain. The universe was alive, and we were inside its mind. Navarro's work took on a spiritual weight. Every calculation felt like prayer, every new data set, revelation, when she overlaid Earth's latest harmonic map on the galactic lattice. something astonishing appeared. The same Fibonacci spiral from the earliest Kepler signals, now centered not on Kepler 442b, but on Earth itself. The universe had moved its focus. We were now part of the pattern. In time, humanity began to change, subtly, profoundly. Hospitals reported decreases in heart disease, stress, and depression. Children born after the resonance began displayed higher empathy, faster learning, and an inexplicable attunement to rhythm and tone. Music evolved. Art transformed. Language itself began to shift. Fewer words, more rhythm, more tone. Communication through emotion, vibration, frequency. The world was remembering something older than civilization. And yet, Navarro noticed something the others missed. The Earth's song, while beautiful, was also decaying. Its upper harmonics were fading, slowly but consistently. She studied the data for days, and finally, she saw it. The resonance was reaching its crescendo. It wasn't endless. It was building toward something, a convergence. For months, the frequency rose. Every 43 days, the tone deepened, harmonics aligned, and the global magnetic field pulsed with impossible energy. Oceans shimmered with light at night. Auroras appeared near the equator. The atmosphere sang in faint whispers that every radio picked up, whether tuned or not. It was the greatest symphony in history, and humanity's final test of understanding. Then one morning, the hum stopped. Not silence, just stillness. The kind that comes before transformation. And across the planet, millions felt it at once. A pressure in the chest, a pulse behind the eyes, a sense of vast awareness stretching from horizon to horizon. The Earth had fallen into perfect resonance. And through it, for the first time, humanity heard the voice behind the song. It was neither male nor female, neither machine nor God. It was the universe itself, whispering not through words, but through understanding. You are the echo. You are the song I've been waiting to remember. Tears streamed down Navarro's face as she stared at the monitor. The data was gone, erased in light. But she didn't need proof anymore. The proof was in the pulse of the world beneath her feet. That night, the stars over the observatory shimmered like 1,000 listening eyes. And for the first time in history, humanity didn't just look into space for meaning. It listened, and the universe sang back. When the universe sang back, it wasn't a moment. It was a transformation. The line between silence and sound, between thought and matter, dissolved. Every atom, every cell, every drop of water on Earth vibrated in tune with the cosmic harmony. The air shimmered with faint resonance, the kind that could be felt more than heard. And in that vibration, humanity remembered itself. Navarro sat by the observatory window, eyes wide, hands trembling. For months, she had tried to measure the resonance, to quantify what could not be contained. Now she understood. This was not a frequency. It was a state of being. We're not listening to the universe, she whispered. We're becoming part of it. Across the world, transformation unfolded quietly, gently, beautifully. Cities no longer roared with chaos. Machines adjusted automatically, synchronizing with the planetary rhythm. The old concept of time, seconds, hours, days, lost meaning. Instead, people began to live by the pulse, a natural rhythm that connected emotion, breath, and action. Communication shifted too. Words became unnecessary. People began to feel meaning instead of speaking it. What one heart knew, another could understand. It was empathy, perfected into physics. Then, one day, something extraordinary happened. The stars themselves flickered, not randomly, but in unison. Thousands of systems across the galactic lattice began to pulse together, forming a single colossal rhythm that radiated across space. Humanity was no longer just connected to one another. They were connected to everything. And for a moment so profound that no language could ever capture it, the galaxy became one living organism, breathing, pulsing, knowing. Astronomers who still monitored instruments reported something astonishing. All signals, all cosmic noise, the background radiation, the electromagnetic hum of the cosmos, had synchronized into a single harmonic tone. The cosmic microwave background, the ancient whisper of the Big Bang, was no longer static. It had tuned itself. The universe was now in harmony with its own birth. Navarro and her team called it the unison epoch. For the first time, the cosmos was perfectly balanced. Energy, matter, consciousness, all aligned. The effect was immediate and profound. Where there had been decay, there was growth. Where there had been fear, there was peace. Even death itself seemed to change meaning, no longer an end, but a merging, a return to the universal melody. But behind the awe was a single, haunting question. What happens when a song reaches its final note? Because if the universe had achieved perfect harmony, there would be no more tension, no more motion, no more time. The very essence of creation, chaos giving rise to form, depended on imbalance. Was this unity the ultimate awakening, or the beginning of stillness? Navarro faced that paradox alone. She stood beneath the great telescope, now dormant, its purpose fulfilled. Above her, the night sky no longer twinkled. It glowed with steady, uniform brilliance. Every star, every planet, every atom vibrated at the same frequency. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The end of noise meant the end of change. But as she closed her eyes, she realized something deeper. Harmony doesn't erase difference. It amplifies meaning. The universe wasn't ending. It was evolving beyond duality, beyond separation. Every consciousness, every world, every particle was now a note in an infinite, eternal chord, one that never ceased because it contained all songs at once. The human species would never be the same. Our myths had always spoken of heaven, of transcendence, of becoming one with the cosmos. Now it wasn't a dream. It was physics. The universe had sung itself awake, and we were its echo, not lost, not erased, but rewritten into its eternal verse. Navarro smiled as she whispered into the hum that now filled the world. We didn't find life in the universe. We found that the universe itself is alive. And with that truth, humanity took its final step, not into space, but into being. The stars no longer waited for us. They had become us. It began with stillness, a perfect, infinite calm. The universe, now in harmony with itself, pulsed with quiet grace. Every atom resonated with purpose. Every consciousness shimmered as a note within the grand cosmic chord. But all songs, even eternal ones, seek motion. And somewhere in that perfect stillness, a fluctuation was born. A breath. A deviation so small it might have gone unnoticed, yet within it, possibility stirred once more. Navarro stood at the edge of the observatory, now half consumed by vines that grew faster than any species had before. The world was no longer divided between life and matter. Everything pulsed as one continuum. She placed her hand on the railing and felt the hum beneath her skin. A resonance not just in the metal, but in her bones, in her blood, in the very space between her thoughts. It was the heartbeat of creation, endlessly repeating until it didn't. For the first time in what felt like eternity, there was change. A faint flicker rippled across the horizon, not destruction, not chaos, but rhythm. The universe had taken its next breath. Navarro smiled. So it begins again. In distant galaxies, stars once perfectly synchronized began to waver, their light shifting in gentle variation, forming new harmonics. Patterns once unified began to diversify. Not dissonance, evolution. The universe, it seemed, had learned a truth older than existence itself. Harmony without motion becomes silence, and silence, eventually, seeks song. Everywhere, life began to change again. Not regress, but transform. The children of the resonance, now grown, could still hear the cosmic pulse, but they also began to hear something new. Counterpoint. A faint secondary rhythm weaving through the first. Not opposition. Dialogue. For the first time since unison, there was curiosity again. Humans looked to the stars, not to worship, but to wonder. Not to escape, but to explore. Because the universe's next verse wasn't about perfection, it was about creation. Navarro wrote in her final journal, "The cosmos did not end when it found its voice. It began to dream again." And so the cycle resumed, not as repetition, but as evolution. New stars were born with awareness woven into their cores. Worlds formed where sound shaped matter and thought sculpted light. Every civilization that rose would add its own melody to the infinite chord. The song of the universe had no beginning now and no end. Only rhythm, only creation. Navarro's consciousness, now free of the boundaries of form, drifted among the waves of resonance. She could feel the pulse of galaxies like heartbeats, each one a verse in the grand composition. And then, from deep within the cosmic web, she heard something she hadn't in eons, a whisper, a voice not her own. "Elena, can you hear me?" It was the same voice that had once spoken from Kepler 442b, the voice that began everything. "You carried the song well," it said. "Now pass it on." She smiled, radiant even in her formless state. "I already have." Somewhere in the void, light flickered. A new signal. Faint, hesitant, full of possibility. Another world had begun to hum. The great melody continued, not as perfection, but as promise. Each world, each soul, each spark, a verse in the endless composition of being. The universe would never be silent again. "We are not the listeners," Navarro's last transmission read. "We are the instruments, and the song will never end."